Hello, I'm Mark Price. I'd like to talk to you today about Saint Mark. No, not me. Today, in my faith tradition, Catholic, is the feast day of Saint Mark, the writer of the Gospel of Mark, April 25th. One of my favorite scenes from the movie The Passion of Christ was after Jesus was arrested. He was taken across the bridge and he was bumped over the side of the bridge, and he's got chains on him and he's dangling there below the bridge. And he comes face to face with someone who's cowering under the bridge. And Jesus is hanging there face to face with this man cowering. As I recall, not one word is spoken. Their eyes meet. And the man under the bridge was Judas Iscariot, who had just betrayed Jesus. And the eyes to me are saying, Jesus, by his eyes, come back to me, Judas. Come back to me, Judas. It's never too late. Come back to me. And Judas, what does he do? He turns away. He turns away. And in the movie, that's when he had the little demons, the little devils start to go into Judas. But that scene where no matter what Judas had done, Jesus is saying, come back to me. You're always welcome, was a powerful moment in that film. So the readings today are from 1 Peter chapter 5, verses 5 through 14, and the Gospel of Mark is the Gospel reading, chapter 16, verses 15 through 20. Interesting about these two readings, the first one, 1 Peter, mentions Mark, Saint Mark, in it. It refers to him as a young man, a young boy who was at the Garden of Gethsemane when Jesus was betrayed and arrested. And it says that this young boy was sort of captured or caught by the soldiers, but wriggled away by slipping out of his clothes, and he ran away naked. And that's believed to be a young, who we know now as Saint Mark. And then the Gospel is written by Mark. Mark is interesting because he wrote the first of all the Gospels. His was the first to be written, and it's the shortest of all the Gospels. And I many times tell friends that, or people who come to ask me, what should I read? The Gospel of Mark, I encourage you to read. It's short, it's an easy Gospel to read, but it's factual. It's just the facts, man. It's the world is against Jesus, and Jesus keeps standing up to the world. It's a wonderful gospel to read, and I encourage it. The Gospel of Mark. So a little bit about Mark, beyond being the young boy who runs away naked from the Garden of Gethsemane. At the time of Paul, when Paul came into the picture and was preparing his missionary journeys, Mark, being a friend of Barnabas, joined them on the first missionary journey of Paul. But then something happened, a problem between apparently Mark and Paul, that Mark left and went back to Jerusalem, to his home. And then when the second journey of Paul was being planned, Barnabas said, let's take Mark with us. And Paul said, no, I'm not comfortable with him. He's done things he's not coming. And sure enough, Paul did not allow Mark to join him on that second journey. But Barnabas took him on their own journey to many churches. One of the churches that was very important to Mark, growing into this evangelist that he became, was the church in Antioch. Also the church of Jerusalem. And ultimately the new building church that was happening in Rome. Mark was ultimately in Rome at the time of Nero, the time of the death of Peter and Paul. In fact, he reconciled apparently with Paul, because at one point when Paul was in prison, he said, I'd like to see Mark. And Mark went and helped Paul when he was in prison. So they reconciled whatever it was that was a problem between them. St. Mark ultimately went on to Alexandria in Egypt. It's taught that he is the first bishop of Alexandria, and it's also in Alexandria where he was martyred, where in, I believe, the year 68, he had a rope put around his neck, and he was dragged to death behind chariots. So this is what happened to Mark. Now, as I've said in other reflections, all these followers of Jesus had to do is stop talking about Jesus, stop writing about Jesus, and they wouldn't face these deaths, they wouldn't face these imprisonments, they wouldn't face these beatings, but they could not stop talking and writing about Jesus. Why? Because it was real. The stories that they're telling about Jesus and who Jesus was real, and so real to them because they saw it firsthand, or certainly secondhand, that they could not stop talking about it. I think the message in Mark is two things. One, he was an inspiration to writers throughout the centuries, also to anyone who was going to proclaim the good news of Jesus throughout the world, through writing, through drama, which is what I do, through artwork. Mark is an inspiration. Also, Mark is a person who teaches us this very, very important lesson. It's not about, as in the story I told at the beginning, it's not about how many times we fall away or choose to go away from the faith, as Mark did and left Paul and Barnabas early on, but it's always about the coming back. It's about how often we come back. It's about our saying, okay, I tried it the other way, but there's something tugging at me in my faith that makes me want to come back. And we learn from St. Mark that Jesus and God are always there with open arms saying, you're welcome back, my good and faithful servant. This is Mark Price. Thanks for listening.